Hello everybody. So I've made you this video on commas, looking at subordinate clauses at the beginning and at the end of sentences. Complex, difficult, and we'll unpick it together. Grab a pen and paper and write some notes down. That'll enable you to remember and to use this in your work. Good afternoon. This is part of a series on commas that I'm doing to help all my students, and anyone else who needs help can click on them. Commas are really, really complicated, and when you use them well, it makes you look very sophisticated, well educated, and it improves your grades. So, all individuals who wish to look like they can communicate effectively should try and master the comma. Newspapers don't like commas, by the way. I was a journalist once, and newspapers don't really like commas. That doesn't mean that commas aren't really, really brilliant. It's just that you try to write newspapers in a very, very simple way because people haven't got a lot of time. Um, uh, Whereas when we're actually doing creative writing, descriptive writing, persuasive writing, we need to express complex things, and commas help. Okay, so this is from the Pro Writing Aid website, and if you look down the left-hand side, it does lots and lots of grammar points and punctuation points that you might find really, really helpful. So you can have a little look at that. But today we're going to do commas with a subordinate clause. So subordinate clauses are sentence fragments that start with a subordinating conjunction. For example, after, although, as if, as long as. They can't form a sentence on their own, comma, but they add information to the main clause, comma. Usually some form of condition, e.g., if you do this, comma, whenever you see him. Subordinate clauses are great because they add variety to your writing, but often writers are not sure how to use commas with them. That's what I said, that journalists, writers of newspapers don't tend to use varied styles. They just have one style and they don't really use commas. But having said that, subordinate clauses are very, very great because they actually help you to vary your writing. If you're writing in the newspaper, you don't use subordinate clauses because they're more sophisticated. Anyway, going off piste here, but let's carry on. A missed comma after a subordinate clause is one of the most common mistakes that we see. So, how do you punctuate a subordinate clause? How do you punctuate a subordinate clause? That is a clause that stands dependent on another part of the sentence, on the main clause. It turns out there's a pretty simple rule. And so here's the rule. The simple rule is if a subordinate clause comes before the clause it is attached to, then it should be followed by a comma. So if it comes before, it's followed by a comma. You do not need a comma before a subordinate clause if it follows the main clause, except for whereas and although. Here's one example. Correct. If you're ready, comma, we can begin. Correct. If we can begin if you're ready. So if you're ready, comma, we can begin. We can begin if you're ready. You can see my other videos uh, on time phrases actually with commas. Correct. If you're ready, we can begin. Incorrect. We can begin if you're ready. Yeah, so if you're ready, if you're going to put it at the beginning, you can use the comma. If you're going to put it after, it's not. Here's another example. Correct. Although you're ready, comma, we must wait. Correct. We must wait although you're ready. Incorrect. Although you're ready, we must wait. Incorrect. We must wait, comma, although you're ready. So basically, if you're putting the although after the sentence, the main clause, you don't need a comma. But if you're putting it before, you do. Okay, I hope that's helpful. So look at my other ones as well. But what I would suggest you do is if you want to look really impressive, use this one. Although you're ready, comma, we must wait. Although I am a teacher, comma, I am also a mother. Although I'm a teacher, comma, I am also a mother. Despite the fact that I left teaching in a school, comma, I am still teaching just as many pupils online. So if you're using a subordinate clause at the beginning of the sentence, you can use a comma. Despite the fact that I left teaching, comma, I am still teaching an enormous amount online. All right, so there's another video on subordinate clauses and before the comma. Yeah, so you can have a look at that one as well. I hope that straightens things out for you. If you got any more questions about the comma, look at the common questions about the comma here. It's frequently asked questions about the comma. There's 26 here. From should I use a comma before an opening quotation mark to should I use a comma before which to do you need a comma before or after to when should I use a comma to separate numbers should you use a comma before whereas and although. Now, yeah, that I actually talked about that up here, so I'm going to quickly look at that because otherwise you're going to be confused, aren't you? Where is that? Okay, so let's just click on that. So should you use a comma before whereas and although? The words whereas and although are subordinating conjunctions. The general rule for subordinating conjunctions states that you shouldn't use a comma before a subordinating conjunction that comes after the main clause. However, whereas and although are examples of adverbs of concession along with though and even though. They are used where a dependent clause is contrasting to the main clause, a bit like but. So then you should use a comma. So you should use a comma to introduce a dependent clause that starts with an adverb of concession. Now, this is quite complicated, really, for some of you perhaps, but it's really important. You do sometimes use a comma when you're using it as an adverb of concession. Correct, I waited at the door, comma, whereas Katie waited in the street. Incorrect, I waited at the door, whereas Katie waited in the street. So you're contrasting the dependent clause, whereas Katie waited in the street, to the main clause, a bit like but. So I waited. No, I am a teacher, comma. Although my sister is a magazine publisher. Yeah. So that you're contrasting it, aren't you? I am a teacher and rather um, poor but happy, comma, whereas my sister is a magazine publisher and rich and not so happy. I made that up, by the way. Okay, so you're contrasting it there. Whereas and although are examples of adverbs of concession along with though and even though. They are used where the dependent clause is contrasting the main clause, a bit like but. So, I hope that hasn't confused you. And so we'll have another look at some videos on commas. Have a look at all of these common questions about the comma. Any others that you might have? I'm not going to make another video now because we can go on forever. Yeah, I'll make another video tomorrow. All right then, bye.